Winchester.
We think we're very good, don't we?
Lovely. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Hello, this and a Wiltshire, please. Thank you.
Oh, those are sweet. Yeah, those are lovely.
Bacon and cheese puff, please.
I take a walk every day for an hour before dinner, and this is generally my walk. I go out at the back gate, across one street, into the cathedral yard, along a paved path, past the beautiful front of the cathedral, turn to the left under a stone doorway. Then I'm on the other side of the building, which, leaving behind me, I pass on through two college-like squares seemingly built for the dwelling place of deans and prebendaries, garnished with grass and shaded with trees. Then I pass through one of the old city gates, and then you are in College Street. Well, the words you just heard there were written by none other than John Keats himself upon his visit to Winchester back in 1819. Now, ordinarily I'd be asking some local expert to come along and talk you through Winchester, but without blowing my own trumpet, I think I'm that man. I was born just up the road here, went to college here, and spent most of my life coming back to this exact spot. And the walk we're about to take today, on this very nice and not forecast autumnal afternoon, is going to be John Keats's Ode to Autumn. Walking down College Street, of course, you can't help but pass Jane Austen's house, where she lived her last days and died on the 18th of July, 1817. It's fascinating to think of her and Mr. Keats being round here at, within a couple of years of one another, and both of them in a particularly bad way. Of course, right next to this house is the venerable Winchester College, one of the, if not the oldest public school in all of the UK, and quite magnificently rendered here in this autumnal sunshine. I'm going to be walking a little bit further down to what we would call the Water Meadows, which is, if I'm to be following the exact trail, where Keats was inspired to write his autumn poem. Oh yeah, and welcome back. I apologise, it's been a little while. I hope you understand. I just started a new job, and September is always a tough time anyway, with millions and millions of things to do. I'm standing right on the corner of College Walk and College Street in Winchester, which 5 years ago, almost to the day, is where yours truly has a very nice picture, I must say, of myself and my lovely wife stood in our wedding gear on what was a very, very wet and cold afternoon. Very luckily, today's weather is much more of the mellow fruitfulness weather, which I'm sure Keats experienced himself when he was down in Winchester. Like I said, Winchester is kind of where my heart is. I was born here, grew up here, and yet it's a strange one because I think because I had parents that weren't from here and weren't part of its DNA, it's always been a strange relationship where I feel quite strongly and quite protective of Winchester. I think it gets given an interesting reputation. I think people think of it as being posh and moneyed and all those things, and of course, it very much is. But it's also got this real magic to it, being what it's always been. It's always been this area of quite incredible beauty. We have the River Itchen running right through the centre, which I'm just walking up to the banks of now, and if I follow that river just a little bit further, I will end up out on the water meadows on my way towards St. Cross, which is where one of the first almshouses was in Winchester, and even now today you can ask for wayfarers' alms. You can say, please, give me some bread and water or wine. I may not try that myself. I think they might tell me to bugger off. They'll realise I'm an atheist. I think there are some cities in the world that suit different seasons. I think of York as a winter city with its sort of cold stone gate and the shambles and the greyness of it all, but it's archly beautiful in a way in which I think it would be hard to replicate in summer. I think of Bath as being a summer city with its bright yellow sandstone sort of reflecting that late afternoon sun. And yet, if I'm honest, when it comes to Winchester, it really does feel like it's a city for all seasons, but it really does suit autumn more than most. And I've just come along now to the exact same path underneath a huge weeping willow, which is where John Keats himself would have taken a lonely stroll before dinner. And I wondered too if he'd been looking down at the chalk stream flowing next to me with the reeds and nettles and everything just starting to die off, but in the most beautiful of ways. I mean, I love autumn. If you listen to last year's episode, which was distinctly more Halloweeny, spooky, I think it's important to understand that my love affair with autumn has been, well, as long as I can remember. If I could trade in my boring February birthday for one in October, I think I'd be a very happy boy indeed, but such is life. Like I said, I got married in autumn, in October, and my beautiful wife and I actually met in late autumn. It's a very romantic time of year, and Winchester's a very romantic kind of city, which is pretty handy given that we're covering one of the most romantic of all the romantic poets. Somewhat annoyingly, the sun has come out to the point where I actually can't see anything on the river. It's blinding me, so I'm going to just step off to the side. I sort of had this image of recording this in the rain. Goes to show how wrong you can be. To autumn. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run. To bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core. To swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more, and still more. Later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease. For summer hath o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swathe and all its twined flowers, and sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press, with patient look, thou watchest the last oozings, hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring, eh? Where are they? Think not of them. Thou hast thy music too. Or barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue. Then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river sallows borne aloft, or sinking as the light wind lives or dies, and full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. Hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft the red breast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. So I'm just looking out across the Itchen now, where it goes from this very, very small little stream almost to this quite huge, quite deep looking part of the river, and it bends off and away from me in through the water meadows themselves. And obviously this time of year what you get is this cascading effect of the sort of russets and oranges of the leaves falling in directly, as I can see, landing directly into the river in front of me. See small little bits of brown trout here, of course, as well, coming all the way across, which is why we have private fishing, no access on here. I doubt that would have been here in Keats' time. Across the other side, of course, I can see the playing fields of both Winchester College and I think the Pilgrims School, if I'm not much mistaken. No cricket to be had in autumn, more's the pity. I think what Keats catches so beautifully in this poem is how the seasons are not distinct from one another. They are overlapping cousins or siblings, and they lead from one to the other with a real sense of passing of the baton. Summer swells the harvest that was first properly starting in spring, and by the time we get to autumn the harvest is ready for the long winter that lies ahead. And it's strange because most people who have a favourite season, they usually cite, what do I love about autumn? I guess I love the fact that it is neither here nor there. I like the in-between seasons where there are not extremes. I like the fact that in autumn, just like today, you can suddenly have to take your coat off because it feels actually quite warm. But then within an hour's time, I bet I'll be putting it back on with a scarf to try and stay warm. I also love the way that autumn lends itself to this, well, I mean, what a wonderful opening line. Mists and mellow fruitfulness. Both the literal fruit being born, but also the idea of sometimes we have our seasons where we feel like our most productive, we feel like our most natural. I find autumn a little bit like that. I find that sense, the change of the seasons. I don't like high summer, I don't like being hot. I don't particularly like being cold either, so in a way autumn's a nice sweet spot for me. And unlike with spring, I'm not looking forward to the heat in any way. I'm kind of quite enjoying it becoming scarf and coat weather a tiny bit. Although if you're like me, you can also end up getting caught out by the seasons, especially the way that it changes from year to year. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that even a half-decent poet would be inspired to write something pretty good about this area. And yet, it's funny really, because my enjoyment of Keats, in comparison to maybe some people's, I feel like I came quite late to him. I studied him along with the Romantics at A-level, and I was aware of him, and he's a name, arguably one of the really big hitters. But it was when I read all about him and I read about his life, and I read about his quite incredible poetry written in such a short space of time. I think that sense of being almost in a race against time. Of course, by the time he wrote this poem, he would have been gravely ill and would have known potentially that he was going to need to do something different, hence his self-imposed trip to Italy, which sadly never quite did the trick, and he died in Italy. And of course we have the Keats Museum at the bottom of the Spanish Steps. One thing's for sure though, he was an incredible man, a real polymath, someone who could be both a surgeon, apprentice to a surgeon of course in his case, and yet ended up giving it up to pursue his poetry. Unlike a lot of the other romantics as well, who were relatively middle class, Keats himself was from a fairly working class background where his parents kept horses. So for someone to have come out of that at that time period and have been able to have written just so incredibly from the heart, but with such precision too. And I'll talk more about the poem and its sort of technical workings in just a moment, but first I'm going to take a moment just to look at this tree. My word. It's raining red leaves on me. To look at the inner workings of this poem, the rhyme, for example, fruitfulness, sun, bless, run, trees, call, shells, more, bees, seas, cells. And for a poem that's very much about nature, it is incredibly artificial in lots of ways. We have pastoral elements along with the agricultural elements here, the idea of the swelling of the gourd and plumping the hazel shells, fill fruit with ripeness to the core. We have this wonderful sense of expectancy, of potential within this, and yet it's not the spring buds that you might expect. It's this sense that forget all the beautiful flowers, we're more interested in the stuff we can eat and the stuff that we can keep and the stuff we can store. But then of course autumn is personified in this second stanza with this direct address: who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind. I always see this quite a sort of cherubic, angelic looking person, much like Keats himself was purported to look like, with this soft hair and this sort of pale face sitting across the floor in a way. I mean, this idea of autumn being both delicate, fragile. You know, if you breathe too hard, it will disappear, it will disintegrate. Because this is the last veil between us and darkness, and the ending of the year. We talked about before with the concept of Samhain, this thinning. The old world, the old year is beginning to wear out and change, and it's a time for reflection, and possibly even a time for storing. You know, there is a very real and prosaic part of it, of this could be the last time that you see an autumn, and of course in Keats's case it would have been. I've just come down through to the back part of Wolvesey Castle, which I'm sure would have been of interest to Keats, given his love of history and his interest in all of the greats, and you think about his love of Greek poetry, and of course I think he wrote about Winchester and its Roman and Saxon past being especially interesting to him. I mean, it's crazy to think he might have been stood right here where I am right now, looking over these same ruins and looking up to the top here of what I know to be St. Giles's Hill, which is the top part of the sort of, well, I think of it as being the bottom end of Winchester. It's actually more the east end of Winchester, and it's right on top by places where they can look down upon the Broadway and upon King Alfred's statue itself. Would not have been there in Keats's time. But there's a real stillness, despite this being a big tourist city. I mean, it's graduation day today for Winchester University, and there are tons of capped and gowned people wandering about like bats in the near Halloween time. Although the thing I find scariest about that is thinking about how long ago it was since I was wearing a cap and gown. We won't talk about that. But there's something really magical about Winchester that I've always been really happy to share with people if they come down to visit me, or if I have friends visiting from abroad, I must take them here. I only wish I could afford to live here. But given we've got the noise of those birds, I think we'll give that last couple of lines a look. The redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. So the final stanza is really one of sound. It's in relation to this idea of the songs of spring, and we think of them and we think of this sense of spring is on its way when we can hear the birds singing again after winter, but he's almost imploring us to listen a little bit closer at this time of year. Hear the wailful choir about the small gnats and the river sallows, and this idea of the lambs, of course, bleating from the hilly bourne. I'm looking up to St. Giles's Hill here, and I don't see any lambs, but I'm thinking in days of yore maybe people would have tended small bits of farmland up there. And it's just really, really easy to get lost in the sort of the timelessness of it all. How lucky, how privileged I feel to be able to share this exact same spot and this kind of moment all these years later with someone who I think we can all agree was a complete genius. So, Mr. Keats, I know it's been a very long time, but I hope by bringing this poem back to life in its fitting setting, somehow or another, it pleases you. Long live autumn. Of course, one thing that we have absolutely no historical evidence of was whether or not Mr. Keats, on his way down to the Water Meadows, ever decided to pop in just a slight detour off Cannon Street and head in for a pint at the Wickham Arms. I can't find any historical records of this, so I guess I'll have to do it for him.
It translates into